Thank you. We'll go ahead and get going. Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning for our City Council budget development meeting. We'll go ahead and get started. Connie, could you please call the roll? Sure.
Adamson. Here. Gray.
Here.
Cheatham.
Here.
Lurick. Here. Ortega. Yes. Stevens.
Yes.
Black.
Here. Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is the budget presentation for capital funds. We're going to be talking about, our CFO, Jim Kruger, will be talking about federal aid projects, Fund 78, general government capital projects, and then zoo improvements. So Jim, we're going to...
So, if I yell, is it okay?
Yeah.
That wasn't a yell quite yet,
I
but
was going to say, are you asking for permission yet, for something yet to happen?
maybe by the end of the day, I will be yelling. I'm not sure yet. But I want to make sure you can all hear me. So we've got several funds that I would classify as capital projects funds, meaning their sole reason for being in the budget is to budget for capital outlay. So we've got 3 main capital projects funds that we're going to talk about today. The first of which is the Federal Aid Projects Fund. And just a little bit of history related to this fund. As I understand it, the fund was, the objective of having this fund set up was to provide for a match money for federal projects. So in other words, if a federal project were to cost $10 million and the match requirement was 10% of that, normally it's a little bit less, but if it were 10% of that, then you would need to have $1 million to match that. So the matching money does not necessarily, it's not coming from Fund 70 in the sense that that's where it's being funded from. It's actually, the match requirement has been funded through the street fund. So the street fund makes a transfer out to Fund 70, and Fund 70 then has revenue in it that can be used to pay for the match requirements that we have on federal street projects. As was indicated by Tom, and this is in a way of a little bit of an explanation, he explained that the desire was last year, and I have not gone back and looked at the minutes of the budget meetings, but the desire was to have $250,000 in addition to the transfer from the street fund, to have $250,000 of tax money allocated to this fund. That did not happen. I can attest to that. That was not in the ordinance that you passed, nor did it end up in the books budgeted that way. So there is not an additional $250,000 in this fund related to property tax allocation. The other complication is that, and I don't know what the genesis of the $250,000 property tax amount was, and I don't know if Tom can explain it any better than I'm trying to, but essentially there was a loan, internal loan that was made to pay for the south interchange improvements. That loan was being paid at $250,000 a year over the course of about 5 years. At the beginning of this fiscal year 21, there was $1 million, 1.250 left over, I believe. That loan got paid off in this current fiscal year. That was part of the budget amendment that was done back in April. So that inter-fund or internal loan no longer exists. That's all been paid off. Sanitation fund is made whole. The source of that loan was the street fund again. So $250,000 coming from the street fund to pay off that loan. So what's left over in Fund 70 is there's not much money left in that fund. It's virtually at a zero balance at this point in time, and that's because we had a couple of projects that we jumped over fiscal years, and we were looking to fund those projects in this current fiscal year. So there was an additional transfer that was made from the street fund to help out, be able to fund those projects, as well as the cash balance that was in the fund. So at this point, we're looking for a budget of $322,000. $250,000 would come as transfer. There's enough cash left over and cash that will come into the fund, repayment of some of the match requirements that we had that we were getting refunded back from the federal agencies. That's just to give you an overview. And Jeff, do you have any more? Where is Jeff? He's back there. He hid back there. Jeff, do you want to come up to the podium? I know he had a very brief report he wanted to give. If you didn't, you couldn't hear that report, could you?
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Jeff Mansfield, Public Works Director and City Mayor for the City of Pocatello. I don't have much more to present. I know Tom presented on his budget, kind of the breakdown over the next 5 years, pretty showed that layout. And then I've also provided a spreadsheet to you all. I believe it was in May, I think is when I provided that a few weeks ago. And so I know we did get an article, Mayor, I don't know if I want to talk about that or not, the one from the governor or from about the Center Street has been accepted on the infrastructure funding. So that one will be moved up. And then we will also be bringing the Carson Street Bridge to you in a couple of weeks. We did get the state local agreement for that. And so that one will be happening soon as well. So, but yeah, we really try to look at the 5-year plan and make sure that we have enough money that make sure that these projects will be executed and that we'll have the necessary match that we need for the next 5 years.
So is this fund intended to be street projects then? Is anybody else able to tap into federal aid?
My understanding of the objective of this fund was to have match money available for street projects, no other projects. I don't necessarily, I'm not going to say that I agree with the basis for setting up a separate fund like this. I'm not a big fan of having lots of funds. It causes administrative issues for the finance department. We have enough of those to deal with already. Thank you very much. But so honestly, I'm not sure that there's a good reason to have a separate fund to set aside money for the match requirements versus just having it as a reserve in the street fund. That if it helps from an operational perspective to transfer out $250,000 so that it's not in the street fund, I can understand that, but there are other ways to do the same thing.
Okay, Roger?
I had 2 questions. One, is the Center Street project now, what year is it on? Is it the one that was given this week, or is it been moved forward?
Well, so right now it's slated on the tip for 2025. However, like I say, it was included in this infrastructure funding, and so I would guess it may get moved up to 22 or 23.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then a comment. I think when Congress used to dedicate more money to special projects, this fund was probably set up to handle some of that.
Sure.
But because of the way things have changed, this only addresses this area.
That's a really good point. And many times the reason why we do have lots of funds is to help with our federal requirements, to make sure that we're accounting for everything separately. And that, I'll take that into account with it.
Yeah, I think, for example, we had a $100,000 or $150,000 special designation for the senior center that I created several years ago. And I think there may have been a little bit of money the city put in there to say we're in it too.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Chris and Linda, sorry.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm wondering if, I mean, where the new Maverick is, that whole intersection, I mean, it was anticipated that it was going to be problematic, and it's
Which
where
one?
the Maverick is, the new
Oh,
Maverick.
okay.
I mean, there's, you know, I'm hearing from people over there because, you know, semis are making U-turns and traffic is backed up onto the highway, and, you know, people are concerned that people are roaring through there at 45 miles an hour, and anyway, it's just kind of a big mess. So I'm wondering whether or not you've had any thoughts about, you know, getting that intersection made safe before somebody dies or is seriously injured.
No, those are great comments, and that's actually, that's actually a state route, and so those are
Right.
ITD's responsibility.
Right.
We did voice our concerns about having a traffic light and things like that there prior to allowing that, but their intention is to redo that whole interchange, and so eventually that'll all get redone.
Right.
But yeah, that's ITD's responsibility.
Is there any way that we can, you know, have collaborative discussions with them and perhaps, you know, take them elbow by the elbow and help lead them to the request table?
You can try, I can give you their phone number.
The reality, though, is we have been having collaborative discussions with them forever. I mean, this isn't a new topic for them. It's not something, it's something that's been on their radar for a long time. And we have done a number of different things with them to help move that along, and they know it's there, and so that elbow to elbow has been happening, but you pull the state where the state wants you to pull them. You don't pull them anywhere else.
Right, right. So, but we weren't.
But we have been talking to them. We have a good relationship with ITD.
And I'm not suggesting
And
that.
the engineers there, they're in discussion all the time.
Right.
They recognize the need is there, and they're putting it in their plans.
Okay.
So,
So, yeah.
But we would rather go into their plans as a proactive thing than in a reaction to a tragedy.
Sure.
And I think that needs to be emphasized.
And we have, I mean, they recognize that there's an issue there.
That's been the common practice for years, but
You know,
there again, ITD
Moves it
you know,
moves it their own thing.
I feel compelled to say, and I'm not getting this vibe from you, Jeff, but, you know, when I ask questions, they are questions. They're not suggestions that people haven't been doing things they should do. They are literally questions because I don't know. And I'm going to continue to ask them, and Jeff, I appreciate your approach to my questions. I deeply appreciate it, and many others in the room who have endured my questions. And I'm hoping that over time, I can convince people that my questions are questions, and there's no need for even a low-grade defensive reaction. Thank you for allowing me to make that
Well, I'm
comment.
not sure what that comment's about, but we appreciate it. Linda?
I would like to ask about the Carson Street project. You briefly mentioned that one too.
Okay.
And that maybe it would be happening sooner.
Uh-huh.
Is that also, was that part of what the governor approved with infrastructure money, or is that separate?
No, so this, if you'll recall, LTAC did a 9-bridge package. They lumped them all together, and our bridge is one of the ones that we submitted and got accepted. And that's a package that has been in the works for a couple of years, and it's finally, we're like I said, we're bringing the construction state-local agreement to you guys, and then that one will be kicking off. But it's just been cruising right along throughout the whole process.
Oh, good. And so the governor, I mean, the infrastructure money is
No.
not affecting that one?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, this one, they have to have our match money by July 15th, and then they'll start kicking off with bidding and everything else, so it'll happen fairly quickly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
Super. Claudia?
I have a question for you. So, is it legal for a department to loan another department money?
What was the question?
Is it legal for a department to loan another department money? Is that a legal thing to do, or is that just something that we do because it's in the budget?
we've done. I don't know if it's a regular practice, but from my perspective, there's nothing illegal about it. I think the more appropriate question would be whether it's a generally accepted accounting practice, and that would be a question for
Okay,
Jim.
so as far as legality goes, it is.
Yep. Well,
You're up.
can I back up just a little bit before I hand it off to Jim?
It depends.
Yeah, exactly. There are some departments that could not loan to other departments. We wouldn't want to be mingling enterprise funds with general tax dollar funds and things like that. So there are some boundaries on it.
Okay.
But yeah, just from a general standpoint, it's not illegal.
So, the question,
Spot, but-
I'm sure the question was not intended to be something along the lines, would it be okay for the Human Resources Department to loan money to the Finance Department? Because the human,
She would love to be in a position to be able to have money.
I have a $300 supply budget, knock yourself out.
No, I mean, no, what I want to know is it, and I understand separating enterprise funds from general funds or whatever it's called. I want to know, is that a generally accepted accounting practice?
it is.
Okay, good.
From one fund to another fund. So in this case, if you're referring to the loan that was made from essentially the street fund to, or it was actually an amount that was paid on behalf of the street fund by the sanitation fund. So that, the basic gist of it was that was a loan. When one fund does not have enough cash, which was what the case was in this particular situation, it is appropriate from an accounting perspective, and the way to make it in accordance with budget law or budget statute is to pass an ordinance or a resolution that actually authorizes the loan from one fund to another and the repayment over time, inclusive of interest, typically. Doesn't have to include interest, but typically it does. And when you have an enterprise fund or enterprise funds, it's really absolutely necessary that that part of it be resolved as far as having a resolution, making sure that the ratepayers in an enterprise fund case understand that there was a loan that was made. And as I understand it, in this particular case, it was absolutely appropriate from an accounting perspective. It's been recognized as such by our auditors. I've gone back and looked at the working papers, and yes, it did qualify. I can't say that I've seen, in my history, I haven't seen a lot of loans be made between funds like that. Typically, when loans are made, they're made between the general fund and other funds. In this case, the general fund was not involved, but that's the typical way that it would go down, so to speak.
So, and this is something that I'm going to be asking of you in the future. I feel, and I hate saying that, but I feel that that amendment was not fully explained and disclosed to the public. And so going forward, can we have, and I know that you're not responsible to that, but going forward, since you actually do know what you're doing, can we have a more detailed explanation on the record so that the taxpayers understand what happened, what didn't happen, why we have to do this, so it's not just lumped into a bunch of stuff, you know, oh, it's not a big deal, because it's kind of a big deal.
So I'm probably not understanding the full context of what your question is, so I'm going to respond in a way that I hope you understand. A number of issues came up as it relates to that budget amendment that was done, and there were a lot of different elements that were included in that budget amendment. I was tardy in the process.
Right.
I didn't get here until late into the budget year.
Right.
The expectation was by the departments that I was going to have a budget amendment to you by probably January or February. That's about when I arrived
I
here.
was going to say, you just.
So, and I'm not, and I want you to understand this, I'm not defensive about this. I'm just explaining how that went down in that fashion. I appreciate the question. The budget amendment was done in the context of what I had seen in the way of budget amendments of past.
Right.
If you would like further explanation, which would include all of the details, I'd be glad to provide those at this point in time. For, in this case, you're questioning whether the property taxpayers had an opportunity to understand the full context of the initial loan, or was it the repayment of the loan?
The repayment.
Okay.
Situation.
So is there an issue related to repayment on an early basis?
No, it's just,
Okay.
it's just that whole amendment. I mean, we passed a whole slew of
Right.
budget amendments, and I don't think that I don't think I had all the details. And so I'm just asking
Okay.
that in the future, and again, I know that this was not your doing, but in the future, I just feel like it's really important to have all the details of why we have to do a particular budget.
Okay.
That way we,
Fair enough.
I mean, and I'm not accusing you of anything.
Sure.
Or attacking you in any way, but
And I would hope that the rest of the city council believes that if it was not explained appropriately, the budget amendment, that they would let me know the same thing. And I haven't heard from any others that said that, so you're the first that I have heard.
I'm not as smart as I look, Jim, but I just, more details are more better.
Okay,
Thank you.
more better.
More better.
For me, it wasn't a particular issue until Tom said, this amount wasn't levied, and then I was like, okay, wait.
Yeah.
What does that even mean totally? And so, and again, it's, it's immaterial other than, okay, so life happens, and, is there, what does that mean? Why, and if it's like, well, it just got overlooked and it just didn't happen, and that's the explanation, then that's the explanation. But that's
Sure.
where I was like, okay, wait.
That's what got my attention too, and I've been thinking about it since Tom said that.
Sure.
And again, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, the world's on fire,
Right.
there's a huge problem. I just thought, okay, now I'm confused, because I'm not even as smart as she looks.
Just on a general point, in organizations that I have been in the past, we did one budget amendment every year. That was it. We do two here. And my typical approach is, if we're doing a good job of budgeting, we shouldn't need to do budget amendments, but they happen. So I'm not going to say that, I'm going to say no more budget amendments, but within the context of what you're saying, I believe I'm going to take it within the context of you're not necessarily wanting to see budget amendments that aren't fully explained, and I understand that.
Yeah, I just need
Sure.
a lot of clarity, so,
We'll give you as much as you want.
state people,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, thank you. We'll move to Fund 78.
So Fund 78 has been called the Capital Improvement Fund / Contingency Fund. I view it as a capital improvement fund. It might be a manner of art as it relates to whether that would be considered contingency or not. I don't consider it a contingency. I consider it to be money that's been set aside for capital projects. In the current year, an amount was budgeted. I don't anticipate the amount that was budgeted, $1,155,000. I don't anticipate that entire amount will be spent. I don't have knowledge of what the city council was given in the way of details as it relates to this fund in the past. So I'm operating on some basis that when I give you this outline of how I would view this fund, which is the next page that follows, it shows the amount of money that is in the fund as of the beginning of the year, the revenue that was received, anticipated to be received, and received for the current fiscal year, and the expected ending fund balance. The amount as of the beginning of the year was $2,619,524. It showed in the column that says fiscal year 2021 actual. The revenue, $1,956,841. That includes a transfer from the general fund. The Hillview remaining balance was transferred to the general fund. That amount was then transferred to the capital projects fund. That was included in the budget amendment. I believe there were some questions as it related to that. I think I explained that during the budget amendment process. Expenditures of, at this point, I anticipate about $500,000. Projected balance at September 30, 2021, $4,076,365. If you look over to the next column, fiscal year 2022, I show that there's no revenue expectation for this fund. That's based on the discussion that we had previously related to property tax revenues. Part of that $1,956,841 is property taxes. The other amount is the Hillview transfer. I show $0 at this point based upon what I have proposed and what I got in the way of responses. I show expenditures proposed of $400,000. If you look in your budget, I show it in a larger amount. More or less, that is a placekeeper because, quite frankly, I don't know what the council's appetite is for capital projects. We have not had an opportunity to develop a plan, a detailed plan. So what I've listed here are some potential projects, things that have been discussed thus far, but haven't really put any specific dollars there. And then I have some fairly large question marks. It was presented by the building department related to City Hall that there would be $200,000 spent for the finance department to put walls all the way up from ceiling to floor to enclose that area so that it would be more secure, more private. I believe that's an estimate that's fairly accurate. The way that Richard had portrayed that, it was to be an expenditure from the general fund. I'm portraying that differently. I believe that that should probably be a capital project instead of coming out of the general fund. If you agree with having that as a potential project, A, and B as something that should come out of the capital projects fund instead of coming out of the general fund, that would be an adjustment to the general fund budget, $200,000. In addition to that, I've talked about accounting software. The first leg, the first module that I would look for in the way of accounting software would be software that would allow for better reporting, better budgeting, better transparency to the city council, better transparency to departments. I think we're all fans of better transparency. It's just a question is, there's a price tag associated with that. I would also propose that the building permitting software be updated. It's currently being handled under our Central Square umbrella, which is the same umbrella that's used for our accounting software. Both of those modules, the reporting and budgeting module and the permitting and planning modules, I'm saying as an estimate about $100,000 for each of those, $200,000 there.
Is that what Richard talked about, having everything online, digitized? Is that the same thing?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So those would be the first two phases of that. The third phase would be adding on, including the rest of the system into that process. I'm guessing at about $1 million to do that. That $1 million phase, I don't anticipate would have to be done in the next year after that. It could be done 2 or 3 years down the road after that. But I am looking for those first two phases, the $100,000 for each of those phases. And I would look for that to come out of this fund, capital projects fund.
So what I'm hearing you say is more accurate budgeting requires capital improvement projects to be budgeted for rather than enveloped into a general category.
Yes, and there's a couple of elements to that as well, Councilmember Bray. So this would be the initial investment. On an ongoing basis, there would be a licensing requirement for both pieces of this. Those licensing requirements on an ongoing basis would be charged to the operations of the general fund, essentially. So I would separate the two pieces, the portion that really is a capital
The
investment.
one that gets us going and the one that maintains.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And then I do have a question because under revenue, it shows 2023 and beyond, there's $10,700,000.
Yes.
I don't know that we've actually discussed where that revenue's coming.
We have, and that's under the, if you look under those, I've got a bunch of question marks down there.
Okay.
So the $10,700,000 conceivably could come from the ARPA program, which is the new COVID relief funding that was approved in January. And we have not had a detailed discussion about A, what we're going to use that money for, and B, how much of it we're going to use. So, but that's conceivably how much we would have available. And could it be used for capital projects? Absolutely. With two limitations on capital projects, or three: either broadband infrastructure, water projects, or sewer projects.
Chris and then Linda.
So is this, we've touched on the notion periodically that for some of these big ticket items, we have to essentially save over a few years to be able to afford them. And I know that's not just necessarily for a municipality, just an easy thing to do, to like earmark money for this, that, and the other thing, or at least that's my impression. But is this a fund where we might be able to do that?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I'll say this as well, along those same lines, I think that's a really good question because it addresses what I believe the desire of departments was, which is to take monies that they had not spent in their budgets, and that was transferred into this fund with the idea that it would be used for the purposes, some purpose related to each one of those departments.
Right. Yeah, because I have an interest in preserving that notion, but the way we're doing it now, at least to me, is a bit inscrutable. So this would make it really clear, I think, so.
Okay, Linda?
We want to be scrutinized as much as we possibly
We do.
can.
I was just wondering about some of the beautification projects that we have discussed, and I noticed those aren't on here on this list of potentials, but it's something that the council has been talking about for several years. We've been talking about it a lot in the last year. One of the main ones was the proposed project on the corner of Alameda and Pocatello Creek in Jefferson, that property, and we talked about the need to budget for that. So my feeling is that that should be in here as a top priority. There were some other projects, sidewalks and signage and lampposts, but all sorts of things that we talked about in the context of beautification that I'd like us to start putting some money towards.
I'm wondering if, I mean, that sort of leads into something I wanted to bring up today anyway. I feel most secure when I'm making decisions within a context, rather than in isolated silos. And so I was wondering if one of the first things, and this is probably already part of the plan, so again, it's not newsflash information, but as part of when we take up again in July with budget matters, I was wondering if we could have at least a stab at a comprehensive list of all the things that not only, Jeff's already given us, Fund 70 information, but if we could get all of this stuff pulled together, because one of the first simple sorts is to say, okay, we have, $500 worth of possibilities, and we have $25 available to spend. We can't do all of this. I mean, and I'm in that place where we've got a hopper full of great ideas, but it appears to me we're going to have to make some tough decisions, and I'd like to make those within a comprehensive context. Is that, I don't know to whom I should be making that request.
I was just going to speak. I think we need a list like you're saying, because, for example, if we need storage tanks for fuel and the prices don't come down, but we're going to have an ecological problem because they're failing, that's something we need to be addressing. And it means that some of the even beautification projects probably need to take a back seat to a crisis. And things that produce revenue, to me, are things we should be doing as soon as we can, so that we're generating revenue, so there's a payback on those projects. So I think we need to have a list that has all of those type of things on it, so that we can start prioritizing and slotting these things, just like we're talking about highway projects, bridge projects, and all that stuff. We need to have an overview where we're looking from our 5,000 or 10,000 feet at what we have to be doing as a city and what our resources are for doing those projects. So I would recommend that we generate a list of these projects, and all of us should be able to contribute, all of the departments should be able to contribute, and we need to drill down and see which ones are most crucial, which ones we see as the most important. I think crucial and important can be a little different term, because crucial means it's necessary, important means it's not absolutely necessary, but it should be done. So I just think we need that list.
It would begin to give us, I mean, we don't have, as I've said many times, we don't have a a citywide strategic plan, so we really don't have any way of saying, okay, here's where we decided, we wanted to be this year, and what does that mean? Because that means we wanted to have these things done, and then that flows right into budgeting priorities. And we don't have any of that structure now. And we also don't have what in Twin they call budget drivers. The AIC presentation conference last year, the Twin Falls city manager talked, and as well as another smaller city manager talked vigorously about the need. The step one in the budgeting process was for the council to determine their budget drivers. We have none of that structure, and so it is what it is. But this would begin to give us that, because then instead of just saying, okay, we're going to do this, and essentially everything else goes into a black hole to either be forgotten or brought up again from scratch the next year, we could at least do a simple sort.
Well, and it gets expansive beyond just capital projects.
Right.
Because capital projects, for example, if we want to do a real intense effort at compensation,
Right.
then we need to know what that might cost us over the long term. And some of these projects might have to go on the shelf, if that's our priority.
And I think to that end, to that list end, I think that department heads know and work very well together, and I think they could get together and say, yeah, I really need this, but this in this department is way more crucial. And I think with that joint recommendation, that'll make it easier for us as a council to prioritize when we know what collectively their priorities are, because they know what's going on.
And they work together all the time
Right.
anyway, and I believe they have more than enough mutual respect to say, I can live without this for one more year, because I can see how important that is to the
Well,
overall good.
they're team players.
I absolutely believe our department heads and division heads have that kind of collaborative capacity and desire.
Linda?
I'm just gonna, I feel compelled, as you say, to make a comment here. I mean, I don't disagree with anything that's being said, but I also feel like that's exactly what this process is. And that is what we do in the budget development process, and that is what our department heads do. They work together and collaborate, and we do decide, we look at what needs to be done, and we decide which things are more critical than other things, and which things we need to put on hold. And it seems to be that, I'm taking from this that we're suggesting that none of that happens, and I think that that's exactly what this process is.
So do you have a list?
That's where I'm
you can
coming
share?
from. We have lots of lists, and we talk about lots of projects, but what I'm saying is I believe that that's what this process is about. So I think that that's what we are doing. That's where I'm coming from. You may feel differently, but I think that those decisions do get made in this process.
Chris?
The process here is, to a large degree, focused on publishing a budget for 1 year. That is the essential purpose of the process we're currently in which we are currently engaged. And that's a piece of a longer-term planning and financial process. But what we're doing is essentially annual. And what I think, at least what I'm trying to express, and I think what I'm hearing, is that we're looking for a longer-term context so that the financial decisions we make today are made with whatever projected insight we are capable of generating. Because the kinds of dollars and projects that we are engaged in making decisions about cannot always be contained entirely within one calendar year.
And the process as it is what has facilitated kicking things down the road. Like the fuel site, like there's a list of things that I hear every day in this room that, oh, well, we've kicked this can down the road. We've put this off long enough. That's because we're only thinking about whatever year we're thinking about. We need to start looking at a bigger picture. And it's our responsibility as a council to look at the bigger picture, not just to figure out, when I do a budget at home, there's a 5-year plan. It doesn't always follow, but there's a 5-year plan. I'm not just budgeting for this month or this year. And I think that that's the big difference between this process and a little bit different process.
Okay.
So are we going to develop a list? That's the question.
Well, just going to ask, where do we go from here then? Because I think we've had a pretty good plan. I think we've had good lists, and I think we've had department heads that have shown us what they've needed for years, and
Where is
every
the list
year
then?
we say,
Okay, so, can I make a comment?
go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so this is your second year doing budget, right? Claudia and Chris? Okay, last year was weird because it was COVID and we were doing it remotely and it was different than any other budget that we've done. Previous to that, I feel like what happened was the departments would come and they would give us their budget, but they would give us a list. It was like, this is what I would like for Christmas. I mean, everybody always has needs. The departments are trying to run very efficiently and they're trying to do the best they can, but things do come up, right? It's not because they're just trying to frivolously, do this or that, but they legitimately have needs. And every time they would explain that to us, they always have a great case for it. They're never putting stuff on there like, could I get, a giant teddy bear? And that would be cool.
I never suggested that was the
This is my concern
case.
about asking for a list, is everybody's gonna have a lot of stuff. And they're
I
all
want
gonna,
one
it's all gonna
list,
be
not a
really
list
well
from each
justified.
department.
Just a minute, Claudia.
Okay. It's all gonna be very well justified. I mean, I can look around the room, every person in here is probably like, yeah, if you asked me to come up with a list of things that I could need and use in my department that are very well justified, like, I'm pretty sure everybody will have something. So, we have had that, and what usually happens is the council says, okay, let's do it. But this year, because there's been a general consensus that we don't want to do any more because we're trying to minimize the tax burden, the mayor has instructed the departments to not bring quite so much of a list. And it seems to me that they haven't brought as much of a list as we have seen in previous years. I don't know if anybody else who's been on the council previously has a feeling about that, but I really am, I just want to say, I think the departments have done a great job trying to listen to what the council has said and not bring all this extra stuff. So that's my only concern, is if we ask for a list, we're going to get a list, and it's going to be stuff that needs to be done. That's all.
Linda, and then Chris.
I was just going to comment too on the idea of, I think our process, and I agree with you, last year was a weird year, so it was different. But our normal process is we do hear what all of their needs are, we do get the list, and we do make difficult decisions and determine priorities. And, we keep using this phrase, kicking the can down the road. But I'd like to get away from that phrase, because what that really is talking about is determining that something is not a priority at the time. It's not just, oh, we're not going to deal with that. It's saying that something else is a higher priority that we're going to deal with first. So there is, we've had lists, we've had priority setting, we've had, all the things that we're talking about are things that I feel are part of this process and have been part of this process. So, I agree that all of that needs to happen, but I also feel that it has been happening. So that is our normal process.
Chris?
I'm not talking about creating yet a list just out of, a Christmas list. I'm talking about taking the information that we have heard in these budget presentations and simply putting it on one page. I'm not talking about every department dream up everything that would be your heart's desire. No, I'm talking about pulling information together from these presentations so that we have a more comprehensive list similar to what is listed on the Fund 78 capital projects on the bottom of that page. I could do that for myself, but it wouldn't include, it might not include something like Linda brought up, well, why isn't beautification on here? The point of this list, as I'm conceiving it, is pulling together what the departments have already told us is critical to them in these presentations, plus whatever other things have been mentioned throughout the year that might not have been part of these presentations, like the fuel site, like all the work that Jeff has done to date around sewering in a couple of our heavy septic tank areas. Those kinds of things, so that we take all the conversations we've had, and we reduce them to something that we can look at comprehensively with a certain amount of clarity and ease. We do not have that. We do not have that this year. I'm talking about this process, decision-making right now this year. And all I'm asking is, can we pull together a list of what's been presented here and what departments have discussed with us throughout the year and what projects council has discussed among themselves this year, so we have it all in one place and we have some agreement that yes, this represents a comprehensive list of needs from which we can begin to work and make financial decisions. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, Rick?
I just think there's two different issues here. One is getting the budget set for this year. We know what money we have to work with, hopefully.
We do.
And we've got a pretty good idea about what money we have to work with and what it's going to take to run the city for the next year. Throughout the year, departments are presenting us with what they're doing and what they anticipate their needs will be in the future. And I think creating that master list that you're after is this council's job, not staff's job. I don't think that the fire department can get with Richard in building and understand his needs. I think those things come to us, and we are the ones who have to make that decision and create that master list and create that future plan. And I think those are work session topics that we need to be engaged in throughout the year, not during budget setting.
Well, I can't make decisions on a budget, I can't make decisions on a budget for this year without knowing what I'm looking at or how much money is actually going to be in our wallet. The big elephant in the room is what these people have been dealing with. We still have no idea what that's going to look like. None. So we really don't know how much money we have to work with. And I never, ever insinuated or implied, and if I did, I apologize, that department heads willy-nilly put stuff on a list without doing their due diligence and having it actually be something they need. I never, ever implied that. I never did.
Okay, Linda?
To go back to the idea of having a list where we put all the projects on there, all on one page. And again, we have a new CFO, we're trying to develop a new process, so there are changes. But in previous years, to me, that's what Tax Solution was. We came up with a giant spreadsheet, and we actually sat here as a council and ordered, everything was on there. It was a master list of everything we had talked about and the dollar amounts, and then we sat here and numbered it and picked our top 10 and then said, 1 through 10, what were the priorities if we could end up affording to do those things. This is the order that they would get into the budget in, and as far as knowing the exact amount of money we're dealing with, we're never in a position to know exactly. We have to make educated guesses. That's the process. We have to wait to get information from the county. The legislature is technically not even out of session, and they're always making new rules for us. So there are lots of unknowns. There's lots of fluidity in the situation that we just have to sort of do the best we can do within that context. But I feel like the Tax Solution spreadsheet, and I don't know if Jim is planning to do something like that or how he feels about that, but to me that was that list where the council prioritized, and not just, we're looking at this year's budget, but we're also looking at long-term capital projects, and we had in fact several lists. It got even, we joked about kind of confusing that we had our capital improvement list and our in the budget list and our maybe if we could list, but we were doing that.
Could you guys please show the respect when this side of the room is talking to stop talking and listen to what they're saying, and then we'll go back and forth. I hear a lot of chatter over here, but I don't hear a lot of chatter over here when you guys are talking. I don't know why we split it up the way we have, but if you'd please be quiet and show the respect to this side of the room when they're talking, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Continue.
And I appreciate that. I'm done. I just feel that Tax Solution was the part of that process where we had the list all on one page and made those decisions, both short-term, like this year, and long-term. So.
Okay, thank you. Roger had something, and then Heidi.
Well, I'm gonna address what I just heard. When we did Tax Solution 2 years ago, and we had the list, Heidi asked me what I would cut. I said I would cut half of that list. There were 18 or 24 items on the list we had that were the optional parts of it. We had what we had put in budget, and we had a list of the other things that could be added. When I asked that we cut half of those out, you guys were indifferent to doing that. I warned that we were getting to this tax situation by doing indiscriminate spending. So don't tell me that we have had lists that we were making decisions on and we were cutting, because we made a list and then we threw it all into the budget. And if I have to go get that tape, I will get that tape. Because Heidi asked me the question, I said I'd take away half of it.
I still have the list.
Well,
I have the
I
numbers.
remember you suggesting that we take the capital out, and that was the only thing I
Well,
remember.
it was, we had a list of 18 or 24 things, and I said we'd take half of them out. Didn't go anywhere. My position is, when we do things in 1 year that are short-term answers to long-term solutions, we're not getting anywhere. Last year, we did a bonus, and I'm going to call it a bonus, and that we should have set it aside and done something with it, because that part is what's going to frame some of the expectation for compensation this year. Quite frankly, you can't give money away and then say you can recoup it. And I'm going to be on that position because it was a bonus. The three that we're talking, or two that we're talking, they weren't part of that. It was the four of you that did that last year. And quite frankly, you need to own it. And you're not owning it by saying we don't, we take lists and then we ferret them down. That's not true. We ferreted down the tax solution for a while, but then we threw everything in it at the very end, when we got down to making budget decisions. And we have to be more disciplined. That's how we get in tax situations that we're in. And I'm going to throw this out there. My tax assessment came to me, my taxes, my taxable value of my house is going up 34.5%.
Your value, not your
No,
taxes.
my taxable value has gone up 35.4%.
But not your taxes.
Okay. The taxes, if I trusted people to know that they can cut that down, it wouldn't go up that much. But I don't trust that. I know of too many people in our town that have gotten hit similarly. They've had 60% tax increases. And we have to be aware of that. What we levy is ultimately because of what we are spending. And if we continue to spend and spend and spend without a discipline, without a strategy, and I don't believe we have a strategy if we're not out there more than 1 year, then we're going to keep spending and spending and spending. And we have to decide how, if we really say our employees are valuable, then how much do we put in that, on that shelf to say our employees are valuable? What do we take off the shelf in order to say that? Those are the type of big decisions we have to make. And I think lists are a very important part of that. And I would start the list with employee compensation. And I would go down in and I'd have the fuel tank thing. I would talk about what are our ultimate biggest needs, and we address those biggest needs, and then we feel our way through the other stuff. We can't be comprehensive with siloed approaches to our budget. And right now, when we have every department bring us their request, bring our request, that's a siloed request, because we're not doing the comprehensive thing, and the list gives us the comprehensive overview from which we make the hard decisions.
Okay, Heidi?
So, what you were mentioning earlier about the list in tax solution and how the council looked at that list and ultimately decided a lot of the things on that list were necessary and needed to remain in the budget, that's exactly what I was talking about earlier. And that's, I guess, why I'm trying to wrap my head around what exactly is the list. I'm just trying to understand what we're talking about on the list, because I guess my point is the council can't have it both ways. We can't say, we're going to do all this long-range planning, we're going to make sure all the needs of the city are addressed, we're going to make sure that we're setting money aside so that we can do this and that and the other, but we also want taxes to be reduced and we better cut the budget. Like, those are not things that both work together. You know, we have to, it's a balancing act, right? You have to try to find the happy medium. So that was my point earlier, was not to say we shouldn't have a list. I'm just trying to say, go back and ask for more of a list and for each department to come up with all of their needs that maybe they didn't address yet in their presentation. It's going to be a list like you talked about, and then what are we going to do with taxes? That's what I'm trying to understand.
They bring us their greatest concerns, and we as a council respond to those greatest concerns with what we believe is the overall, overarching responsibility for the city.
And I feel like they do still give us their greatest concerns, and that they have this year in their budget presentations. And when I remember back to when I asked you that question, I said, please tell me where you would like to cut. Are you wanting to cut police? Are you wanting to cut library? Those, you know, where are you wanting to cut?
And I said I would begin with that list of the
No, what I remember you
24
saying
items.
was, I would take out the $1 million that was budgeted for capital contingency, and that was the only thing that I remember you suggesting.
Okay, well, look at.
Okay, so Linda has something.
And we can definitely go back and look at that. I still have the actual printout with the notes and the numbers and everything, and I'm happy to find that and bring that in, and we can look at that. But to me, that process is where we make those decisions, and it's both that year's budget as well as the long term. So I think we do need to bring back some version of that. I feel like that really helped us put everything into one context where we could make the decisions, and I don't think that everything on that list made it into the budget. But the other thing I wanted to address specifically is the issue of employee compensation. And I have always been in the position where that is one of our top priorities. And in fact, gotten a lot of flack from this council for my position. I agree. Last year was a one-time bonus. I was strongly opposed to doing that. I thought we needed to have a raise, not a one-time bonus. So employee compensation is a top priority, speaking for myself, and I think that that needs to be balanced with, you know, being responsible with taxpayer money. We have to, you know, do the best that we can, but we also have to provide services to the taxpayers. That's what their taxes are for, that's what they pay for, that's what they expect, and we have to provide those services in the best way that we can, and it's the employees who actually do that work. They are the ones who provide those services, and it's our job to support them in the best way we can to do that job the best that they can, and part of that is compensation. So to suggest that I personally have not made that a priority. I mean, I was against the one-time pay, but felt like that was the best we could get last year with this council. So that has always been a top priority. I think we need to take care of the people that provide the services to our city so that we can serve our city in the best way possible.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
I pretty much disagree with the concept that you presented, Heidi. I believe that having a plan is exactly how you achieve multiple realities. I believe that and I think we see that from some of our complex departments with high expenditures. I think we saw that yesterday. That the way they manage to do the great job that they are doing is because they know in what year they need to do what and what that means fiscally. And then within that, of course, life happens and they make the adjustments they need to make. So I am bewildered as to why our city administration is apparently not able to do the very thing that allows our complex, expensive departments to do. Why are we not learning from the example they have set? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, the bottom line, what I hear and have heard over the past 3 years of being out in the community, a fair amount on an official capacity, it's not necessarily just the tax amount. The underlying problem that we don't talk about, and I think we need to address in a very fundamental way, is a large portion of this community does not trust this body and the rest of the administration. Well, let me just say that the people sitting at these tables, whoever they are in a given year, a large portion of our community does not trust that we are operating in a coherent, responsible fiscal way. As one gentleman said to me just a few weeks ago, everywhere else in my life, when I pay money, I know what I'm getting. And I trust that I'm getting the value that I'm paying for, because I know what I'm getting. We have not managed somehow to deal with that fundamental trust issue between our taxpayers, without whom no one in this room would have a job. We've not done a good job there. And until we, I mean, it alludes to I'm amplifying on what Roger alluded to. Without trust, it doesn't matter if we spend $10 or 10 million. Without trust, they're not going to believe, the public is, a large portion of the public is not going to believe they're getting what they need. So I believe if we have a plan and the public can see us planning in a long-term, coherent way, I believe that goes a long way to start building confidence in the fact that their money is being spent by people who know how to function responsibly.
Okay, Heidi and then Claudia.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to your first comment about having a plan. I was not in any way suggesting that we should not have a plan. I think we do have plans. They may not be the plans formatted and presented in the way that would be your preference, but I think there certainly are plans. I think each department has a plan. I think the mayor has plans. I think the city council has had plans. We've had how many meetings and strategic, planning sessions have we had? We haven't had any lately, but we had a lot, and we were moving in directions, and we had plans. So I am 100% in favor of having plans, and I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't have plans and that we shouldn't be forward thinking and looking at things that we need to, plan for as it relates to the budget. I was specifically talking about for this particular budget that we're dealing with here today, like Rick mentioned, I don't know if we're going to be able to address every need under the sun. That's all that I was saying. I'm not saying we shouldn't plan for it in the future. I'm just saying we can't say we want this year's budget to be reduced and we're also going to address all of those, and you just can't do both realistically.
Okay, Claudia?
Mine's a comment, and I'm going to be done with this topic. I just find it really interesting that we've spent about 40 minutes now arguing over a simple request for a comprehensive list. I find that unbelievable. I don't understand the resistance to that, but what it says to me is that Rick, Linda, and Heidi, you guys don't want to consider doing anything different than what has always been done. And to me, that's a problem. And with that, I'm done with this whole conversation.
Chris?
What I was going to say was along those same lines. I don't understand why it's apparently more possible to put a rover on Mars than it is to have a list of the needs that departments have and non-departmental entities have presented to us this week. And I don't understand why that's a challenging suggestion.
Okay, so I'm moving forward. We'll move forward here. This is what I'm going to do. It's opposite of what we were instructed to do before the budgeting started. I'm going to have the department heads please send us a list. Put a list together to send it to Jim of your needs. We don't want a Christmas list, we want needs. And the council is going to be given the budget with this list. The first part of, the very end of this month, so that you can look at it as a council, you can look at it and you can prioritize what you would like to, and we will figure out what we're going to put into the budget. It was very clear that we were cutting the budget and stuff before, but at this point, we're going to go ahead and just get a list. I don't know if any of it will be budgeted for or not, but please put that list together, send it to Jim, and then we will go from there. And I wanted to move on, Chris, but what have you got to say?
What you just paraphrased is not at all what I have been expressing.
This is what I've heard in this conversation right here.
That's why
I have
This
said
conversation
over
for
and
45
over-
minutes,
I have
we've
said-
heard that. So, please.
Nobody implied that a list was going to mean not cutting the budget. But that's exactly what you
Why
just
would we
said.
ask them-
We were gonna cut the budget, but now we're gonna have a list.
Chris, go ahead.
All right. All I am asking for, which is essentially a secretarial task, is to take the needs that the departments already presented to us as part of the budgets they have already presented to us and put them on one list. That's all I was ever asking for, so that we can see them 1 through 5, 10, 20, or 2,000, whatever those are.
Are you talking
And
about just
the-
for this year's?
For
what they
this
presented, or
year,
because
for
they
this
presented stuff in
year.
the past that they didn't bring
For
us
this
this year.
They were told not to bring what they had brought in the past. So I'm gonna have a list generated, and then you'll get it. You can do with
All right,
that list what you would like to.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're gonna move on
Mr. Mayor.
because we're talking in circles right now about a list, and here's a list. Now we don't want a list. Now we do want a list. We want a list only from here. We don't want a list from there.
Mr. Mayor,
If we want a list, we're gonna get a list.
Mr. Mayor, could I finish? Could
So I
I?
had to get you there, so please.
You are not, Mr. Mayor,
Finish,
you're
please.
interrupting me, you are being rude.
Okay,
are
thank you
doing-
very much. Thank you. We will go ahead and move on to zoo improvements, the next item, zoo improvements.
Take a break.
Let's take a break. That's a good idea. We'll be able to take a break and then we'll go from there. So we'll break right now, we'll come back to zoo improvements. After this after the break we just had, we're going to go ahead and cancel the rest of this meeting for right now. Council's going to go into an executive session in a minute, so in lieu of things that have just happened in this past little section, I'm going to go ahead and cancel the remainder of this meeting, and so we are adjourned from the budget development meeting.